Hey Gators, welcome back to Module 6, Part 2. So we're going to be going more deeply into Chapter 9, Criminal Justice Policy and Media. Let's get started. So we're going to be talking about media and crime tenets from the Surratt text, focusing specifically on backwards law and crime and justice ecology. So first, just by way of review, we're going to talk about backwards law. Now we've mentioned this a ton in the course. You've seen it in many modules and used throughout your chapters. But backwards law is the idea that media will present an image of criminality that is opposite of what the crime and justice reality truly is. So in every subject category, whether we're talking about corrections or courts or crime fighters, victimization, offenders, the media construct and present an image that's opposite of the real world. So maybe the question you've had all along in class is, why do they do this? Why would they want to purposefully distort these images? And some of the reasons are quite practical. If you would show an actual case and a timeline in real time, it would be really boring because nobody wants to watch police filling out forms. Nobody wants to watch judge or jury deliberations that aren't very dramatic. It's not very entertaining. So often the distortions really move the story along, whether it's a news story or a dramatic episode, and it's more entertaining. Again, the drama kind of plays upon our own fears and our own doubts about what's really happening, which, again, make it more interesting to watch. So that's some of why we see the distortion. And again, if we pay more attention to it, it'll sell more tickets, it will get higher ratings, and therefore make more money for media companies, if that's the bottom line. So really, both crime within society and the criminal justice system's response to crime is a focus with backwards law. But for the most part, the focus is on law enforcement, okay? But it does include crimes, criminals, crime fighters, which could be citizens, as we've talked about in prior modules, the courts, attorneys, correctional officers, inmates, the investigations of crimes, arrests, processing and disposition of cases, the experience of being incarcerated. But ultimately, when you look at any of these criminal justice experiences, it results in a lack of understanding about crime and justice. And so if we're constantly kind of pummeled with these false images, then we're going to take some of these false images with us when we go to look at law, policy, and politicians in the system. We're going to think that it doesn't work, or it's ineffective, or it's vulnerable, or whatever. So essentially, backwards law occurs in almost all media portrayals of the criminal justice system. We see it in infotainment, in dramas and documentaries. We see it in TV shows with high entertainment content. So it's very front-loaded to look at law enforcement. You're going to see the gunfights. You're going to see the slamming down the victim on the hood of the police car. And it really is just those dramatic, tiny moments that really do not make up the most part of a police officer's day. So you get a lack of system-wide information and a lack of factual information. You don't know what happened before the gunfight, after, what the judge said, where the warrant was given. You don't have all those contextual pieces, and so you really don't come at it with all the facts. We also see this in crime and justice news content, where the criminal justice system is seldom the focus of the news, and it's more often a background, right, that focuses the crime or the person, the individual. And when crime prevention is a focus, it's often a criticism of how poor of a job they're doing. Now, crime prevention is rarely a focus, which would be the most useful when you think about it, to actually show people how they could protect themselves better. Doesn't get covered very much because, again, it's not seen as exciting as crime itself. So again, as we study backward law, this results in that bottom-up perception of the criminal justice system. So this is illustrated in the formatting of criminal justice stories in the news and entertainment or infotainment industries. We have two main formats that Surratt talks about in your chapter. The first is the episodic format, where you have the stories are treated as discrete events, crimes are described, and a case is followed. And again, you don't have all the details. You don't see it from start to finish. You just see moments or episodes inside a full case. This is the more common format that we see out there in entertainment or infotainment. The second format is a thematic format, where it's not necessarily following a case particularly. It just explores a crime and justice issue or a category of crimes like drug dealers or sex offenders. It highlights trends, persistent problems, or other systematic phenomena. Okay, so again, not as exciting because it doesn't have that same story component that we find very compelling as viewers or readers. But we do see this format as well, where it's kind of almost political and agenda-based when you see it out there, but again, less common. So when we have media, crime, and justice tenets in backwards law, again, the bottom-up perception of the CJ system, the focus on the episodic formatting gives us an implicit evaluation of the criminal justice system and constructs crime in a way that individuals are responsible for crimes rather than society as a whole. So it really ignores a lot of other complicated social problems that are also accompanying criminal justice issues and criminality. So this, in turn, shapes the perceptions of necessary policy that needs to happen. So you see policies that go after a person, a predator, a type of victim, rather than the behavior itself, the system, or the environment that everything is happening within. So again, the media portray police as doing a fair job. They have kind of a C grade, if you will. So we highlight the superhero moments that they have, but then we also show them as being brutal and overstepping boundaries. So between the superhero image and the brutality image, you kind of average the two and you get that fair job. That between the A and the F, you get a C. So that's the most common public takeaway. When we look at corrections, they're doing a poor job. They almost are never conveyed in a positive light. And what illustrates this is repeat offending, you know, long incarceration, inmate treatment, things like that. So they're always given an F by the public. And then with courts, they're also seen as doing a poor job because, again, people don't like that due process focus out there because they've already formed an opinion due to that famous pretrial publicity we've already talked about of this person's guilt. So the court is really getting in the way of the inevitable. So that's often why they're portrayed as doing a poor job. Civil cases, not so much, but criminal cases, definitely. So the public's rankings of these systems altogether are really the same. The overall system is evaluated as poor. They know it's an arbitrary system. They know that there are tensions in the system between due process and crime control, but it just looks really ineffective to the public. And these inefficiencies are kind of exploited and portrayed as main themes out there in media. So the public does support crime control and law enforcement-oriented criminal justice policies. So they're more on that crime control side of the Herbert Packer model. But again, it's not always the best, and it has its problems, as due process also has its problems and challenges. But essentially, the public likes to see policies that target street criminals. They're perceived as the most pressing issue. They are predatory and attack people who are completely innocent. The media implicitly suggests that improving the system is the best way to protect against these criminals, yet they're very antagonistic toward the system, so it's kind of funny how it's counterbalanced that way. And essentially, it suggests quick fixes for complex social problems. Many of these criminal behaviors are underlined by mental health issues, distribution of wealth, poverty, racism, sexism, classism, I mean, just so many other kinds of things that go on. Inability to emotionally regulate ourselves, lack of supports, you know, all kinds of stuff that happens. Unemployment, things like that. So when we look at the social ecology of how crime and justice plays out in the media, we get these populations. So first we have the ideal offenders, and Surratt identifies these as the wolves. So the ideal offender is a wolf, an outsider, a stranger, someone we don't know that doesn't care about us, a foreigner, an alien, an intruder who lacks essential humanity and rehabilitative potential. So the example given here is the Virginia Tech shooter. And I don't know if you've ever seen some of the videos that have come out about confessions and so forth, but they are pretty disturbing to watch. And again, this is kind of a common illustration of this person has absolutely no humanity, is completely morbid, and a predator. Then we have ideal victims, and these are seen as sheep or lambs to the slaughter. So they are very innocent, very naive, trusting, and protection, needing humans to look out for them and provide oversight. children are actually the most ideal of the ideal victims. And we see this through Megan's Law, okay, when we have children kind of preyed upon in this way. So that's why those cases tend to get more coverage, especially in murder and abduction cases. And then finally, we have the ideal heroes, we call the sheepdogs, kind of trying to fend the wolves off from preying on the sheep, displaying the admirable qualities of sacrifice, being willing to take a hit, to run toward danger rather than away from it, the nobleness and strength of them. Sometimes they are traditional by-the-book police officers, but frequently they are rogue officers who have to take the law into their own hands, or even civilians kind of acting in official capacity. Now, over time, this ecology has become more extreme, and the more extreme it is, the better the story is, and you see lots of things on cable TV and Netflix and so forth that become very popular because of this. So again, social ecology is the messages projected that crime is caused by predatory individuals who are inherently different from the rest of us. It's really us versus them, all the law-abiding citizens versus everybody else. And so in turn, it begs the question or request, special crime fighters are needed to combat these terrible people. And individual explanations for crime are what are emphasized versus structural issues being irrelevant or completely ignored. So the social environment of what's going on, plus the front-loaded portrayal in these episodic themes, it is basically coming to the promotion of pro-law enforcement policies and crime control policies, which again may or may not be the best approach. It's a very knee-jerk reaction to crime. So, and sometimes we get to this ultimate skepticism, which is, why prevent what is inevitable? You just have to control it. It's sad that crime prevention isn't utilized more and that those stories don't get covered as much. But again, that's what we see in the media portrayal. So we're going to turn to a second part of the Surratt text, which is imminent, not imminent, but immanent justice ruling the media. So immanent, just in case you're unfamiliar, not imminent, is existing or operating within or inherent. So when we say immanent justice, we're talking about the belief that a divine higher power will intervene and reveal and punish the guilty while protecting the innocent. So within these troubles is this intervention, okay? So we see this example like gunplay in the media. So it's funny how the crime fighter bullets don't miss. They always get their man or woman, and then the criminal bullets that they're firing really aren't accurate. They miss every time. Okay, so it's funny. If you're a shooter or a gun owner, you know that it takes a high amount of concentration to hit your target. And if you're in the middle of active threat or gunplay, you're going to miss a lot of the time. As accurate as you are and as experienced as you are, you're going to miss sometimes. But when you see a show, we don't want to watch the misses. We want to watch the hits, right? Because that's not entertaining. Again, this whole idea of immanent justice relies on the moral superiority of the crime fighter as a better person, or even a superhuman or superhero, to go after that evil person, good versus evil. So this ties into the overall media emphasis on individualism and personal action. The only way to stop crime is to be that superhero myself. And the appropriate solution to crime and victimization, which again overemphasizes the crime control model. It reflects basic cultural values of the good versus evil fight, and it really diminishes crime as a social problem. It in turn turns it into a theoretical problem, or theological problem instead, that we have to have this divine intervention of this moral justice sweeping in and taking over, rather than something we can actively fight as a community, okay? So again, theological versus more administrative or government focused. So in conclusion, there also is an emphasis on technology, technology enhancing crime fighting. So you need all the equipment and the guns and everything, that's what's going to do it. In the media, collective responses to crime are effective, but only if they have really cool technology, because again, the gadgets and the gizmos are what sell tickets. So immanent justice is often helped by technology, like all these kind of powerful tools that help us zero in on the truly evil. So again, that social structural cause of crime is ignored, and crime is really painted as a technological problem that can be tamed by more manpower and more equipment. this in an extreme case can lead to what we call militarizing the police. I remember I was talking to a sheriff's office in a Maine metropolitan area that were kind of joking around saying, oh yeah, we're inheriting all this equipment from the Department of Defense back from our more intense war on terror days. You know, they don't have any use for it anymore because they're leaving these active conflict zones, and so they're giving it to the police, and they basically got a Bearcat. And if you don't know what a Bearcat is, go look it up. The police loved it. They said it is so fun to drive in parades, but it's really impractical. Finding the garage space for this thing is really difficult, and they have never used it in actual crime fighting. It's a big toy, basically. So, you know, why are they getting military vehicles and technology for something they really can't use it against? And, you know, they admit that it would be pretty intimidating and scary to see a Bearcat driving down the street chasing a criminal. It wouldn't be that fast either, unless everything was really snowy or whatnot. But again, we see these things kind of play out. It's really interesting to see this stuff. And it was kind of interesting to talk about that. But this is where we're going to leave off, and we'll pick up in the next lecture from here. Thanks for watching.